you're actually going to do the questions on your own, but we're going to do the discussion, the reading and discussion together so that we can maybe help you do well on the questions. But last time we did the passage and the questions, so now I'm scaling back a little bit. Questions 1 through 11. Read the following passage carefully before you choose your answers. This passage is from an essay published in the 1980s by a writer who was born in Trinidad, a former British colony. So we've got some information there to consider. Anytime they give you that information, it usually has bearing. So, childish memory recreates one of those Trinidad afternoons of burning heat, glare, heat waves making watery mirages on the asphalt. I seem to remember how the wind stirred the wild grasses growing along the verges. An aircraft was standing on the runway. Look! Look! Someone, presumably my brother, was waving a handkerchief at us from a porthole. I seem to recall to the roar of the engines, the aircraft climbing into a blank blue sky, becoming smaller as it rose higher, shrinking into an ever-diminishing point of metallic glitter, disappearing. I would have been about 5 years old at the time, the baby of the family. On that day, my brother had disappeared into regions unknown to me, and so became, as I have said, cloaked with an unreality I found impenetrable. But this unreality, however abstract, however bloodless, was loaded with implication for me. My brother, by reason of his academic successes, had established a pattern, a set of standards. Willy-nilly, these were transformed into a sort of absolute, a small island, colonial style. Willy-nilly, my character, my actual performance, my promise, would be judged against expectations generated by the absolute. He had won an exhibition, a type of scholarship, to a good secondary school. Would I? He had won a Trinidad government scholarship that had taken him to Oxford. Would I? Invariably, how could it be otherwise? I suffered by comparison. No one ever quite lives up to the demands of an absolute. You gaze into mirrors, school reports, other faces, overheard opinions, and all you ever see reflected are your own inadequacies, the treasons you are alleged to have inflicted on a self-contained, self-sustaining regime of preconceived and unexamined expectations. I became sensitized at an early age to discourtesy and stupidity. Those without imagination are doomed to these twin vices. Looking back on myself, I see I was a difficult, moody, and enigmatic child. It was a form of self-protection against the tyrannies that sought to imprison me, that offered me neither compassion nor courtesy, and perhaps the child has developed into a difficult, moody, enigmatic man. He doesn't like to think he is, but he recognizes, glancing into the mirrors that offer themselves, he may be. Incidents come to mind, some of which still cause me pain. There was that most august relative of mine, who, I was probably about 10 years old at the time, when I balked at eating with my hands, I can no longer remember what led up to that petty action of rebellion, remarked, "Wait until you get to Oxford. You haven't got in there yet. Remember that." Now, even at so tender an age, could I possibly forget? So what's going on here? Basically, the overall gist of the passage. Yeah, we start off with the memory of the brother taking off on a plane. This almost magical quality here in this first paragraph. Ephemeral and diminishing, and a lot of times 5-year-old memories, especially with stuff like that, can be almost like flying is magical, as these sorts of things. But the brother is almost raised to this level of apotheosis, this level of godlike status, and so the younger child grows up feeling he or she has to do what? live up to an absolute, live up to perfection, right? So, that's a hard thing to do. Certainly a hard thing to do if you're a younger sibling trying to live up to the amazing older sibling. Ooh. Right? Those of us who are only children don't experience that, but I've seen it enough to understand that it happens sometimes. Not always. Sometimes the older child is the one that doesn't achieve. But there is certainly a pressure for younger children. Trinidad is not a particularly wealthy place, so it's even more so driving home, Oxford. Where is Oxford? It's in England, yeah. One of the world premier colleges, universities in England. I mean, we have Harvard, they have Oxford. I mean, Oxford is like very premier. And so the idea of the older brother getting a scholarship from the government to go study at Oxford is from Trinidad is big, right? So we have this childish memory here, and it's memory from early childhood, which gives it a fuzzy, almost magical quality, right? And what does that do for the brother? That raises him to an almost magical status as well. It's not just the plane and taking off into the sky. It's literally apotheosis, the raising up of a human into God-like status, is the word we use for that. But there's a fuzziness that lends this almost magical quality. And of course, being a 5-year-old in a very poor country, planes may not have been as much this child's experience. Now, as I've said, cloaked with an unreality, that magical quality again. But that then begins to be, the brother sets the standards. What does willy-nilly mean? He says it once, twice.
Insane.
It's not insane.
It's just like an exaggerating word to tell about like how much something happens or to what extent.
The way in which you do something. The way in which something gets done. Willy-nilly means sort of all over the place, sort of not an organized approach. You're not taking an organized approach. You're going kind of willy-nilly. You're going haphazard. And so saying that all the things the brother did, these things in their own various willy-nilly haphazard ways became an absolute. This concept of the perfect character. And here the child, my promise. What do we mean by that word, my promise? Does it mean making a promise? All of you have promising futures. What does that mean?
Like it's
Potential, yeah. My promise would be judged against the expectations generated by that absolute. What is that absolute? The brother. Yes. So you've got that, I will be judged by my brother. And so then there's a societal and a family expectation of being like the other, that you can be no different than the other. You can't be your own person. Very colonial type thing, as it said earlier. So, what's with the rhetorical questions? as we move down. Would I? He had won an exhibition-type scholarship to a good secondary school. Would I?
It's more of a doubt. It's just him comparing himself to his brother and acknowledging like just how much he has to live. Yeah, how much he has to live up, and how much everybody else thinks that he should do like him or better.
Yeah, there's the expectation, and it's not totally clear here, and I guess you could go either way with this. Would I could be the expectation others in the family are putting on him or her, or the expectations putting on self. Would I be able to do that? Would I live up to that? But then you get this next question, invariably, how could it be otherwise? So our narrator is stuck inside expectations of family, right? What do we call that sometimes in an easier way? Maybe you don't. You haven't thought of that, perhaps. We often use the term living in the shadow of somebody. Right? Well, your brother did this. Your father did that. And the conflict there, of course, the internal conflict is what? Potential internal conflicts.
Since you're related to him, you're expected to be just as good or even better than them. Puts extra stress and self-doubt on yourself.
And sameness, right? Do you get the sense that this narrator gets to be, if they want to be a painter, that they can go do that?
No. They must go to Oxford.
Yeah. Are you going to get a scholarship to go to Oxford? Are you going to get to go to a good secondary school? Are you going to... All of that, is being put on this person. And by doing that, it creates what societally for this person? Moving on with the rest down the passage here. You gaze into mirrors, school reports, other faces, overheard opinions, and all you ever see reflected are your own inadequacies.
He always sees his faults everywhere he goes.
Yeah, because there's this measuring stick that is so extreme. Very few people get to go to Oxford. I mean, it's a big school. Lots of people go there.
It's like me believing I'll grow to 6 foot.
But yeah, it's those inadequacies. You know, the idea that creates insecurities, right? Securities. I can't spell today. Insecurities, a self-worth issue, questions of self-worth. So what overall is the tone of this passage so far?
Kind of sad.
It's very somber, right? You start off with this magical sort of moment that disappears into the clouds, and then the cold hard reality of living up to societal and family expectations, trying to be always being compared to the older sibling, and not really there being any question of what do you want to do. Notice that's never a question. What do you want to do? It's, are you going to go to Oxford? Are you going to do as well as your brother? And like I said, some of you have experience with that. Some of you may have younger siblings that'll have that experience with you. Not that you'll intentionally do that, right? But sometimes parents do that. And why do they do that?
Because if you have one child like succeed in something, you want both of your kids or all of your kids to do really good. You want them all to succeed.
Well, if one couldn't succeed, they think the other can too.
And what is succeed? What does that mean?
Parents' perception of success.
Parents' perception, the family perception, the societal perception of success, right? This person, our narrator, is very much trapped in those expectations. And so how does that affect the child? Yeah, and you have here, like, I got used to at an early age to discourtesy and stupidity. Those without imagination are doomed to these twin devices. Looking back on myself, I see that difficult, moody, enigmatic, mysterious child. It was a form of self-protection against the tyrannies that sought to imprison me, that offered me neither compassion nor courtesy. So all this pressure to perform does what to the character of our narrator?
Turns them into
A difficult person, right? These defense mechanisms. You keep expecting so much of me. That expectation that's really almost unreasonable creates this sort of personality of difficulty, moodiness, mysteriousness, maybe not wanting to share your dreams and your desires with others. That's where the enigmatic comes from, that mysterious sort of thing. To protect yourself from the hurt of that. And it goes into adulthood. And then the end here, we have a little bit of a shift. We started as a child, then we started growing up. Then as we go here, we turn into a man. And then we have a little reflection of the past. Incidents come to mind, some of which still cause me pain. There was that most august relative of mine, August. Notice I didn't say August. It's not capitalized. It's not the month, but it's August. And it's related to the same word, the name of the month. What is the month named after?
I was born in the month of
Augustus Caesar. Augustus Caesar. Augustus Caesar. And the word has come to mean very grand, to be highly lauded or respected. Your august visitor.
Yeah, that's
So you have this relative who's very grand and accomplished, who
didn't like eating with
who didn't like the 10-year-old narrator eating with his hands. Wait until you get to Oxford. You haven't got in there yet.
That's what his brother said.
That's what the relative said. It's that doubt. It's that doubt. Yes, enforcing that on a 10-year-old. So that gives us a little bit of a breakdown of the passage. Now what I'm going to do is unlock the questions for you, and you will be able to work on the questions.